How do we know that we're growing in prayer? What does real growth in the spiritual life look like? And how can we gauge where we are at on that journey? Arguably, one of the greatest spiritual directors in the history of the church and masters in the spiritual life is St. John of the Cross. He wrote his well known book, The Dark Night of the Soul. And in the preamble of that book, the first 7 or 8 chapters, which comprise less than 14 pages, he talks about what it looks like to convert initially from the world to faith, and then from faith to authentic purification and growth, which he calls the dark night of the senses. In this video below, check on the link, I have a handout presenting on St. John of the Cross's explanation, as well as a PDF file of his actual work. It only requires 14 pages of reading if you want to read from the source itself beyond my summary. But his book became super important in my own journey of faith. I remember entering the seminary after my conversion at 13 years of age, entering the seminary at age 22. There was a moment 2 or 3 years in where I felt like my prayer was becoming less than, that I felt dry. It was a desert spiritual experience. And I wondered, how is it that I feel that I'm further from God and that I'm praying less now that I've experienced 2, 3 years of seminary formation? You would think that in entering seminary, I would pray more and feel more intimate and close with the Lord. But the exact opposite was true in my experience. And I began to question and wonder many things. First and foremost, why am I here and how is this helping me become a saint? When one night, restless and unable to sleep, I remembered vaguely a professor talking about the dark night of the soul by St. John of the Cross. I went through my library and found the book and just started reading. It was 2 or 3 in the morning, and I didn't put it down until I had a great sense of peace that what I was going through, John knew perfectly and explained in a way that brought me great peace, comfort, and consolation. I was on the right path, in spite of feeling further from God, in spite of not praying as much as I used to. I was actually growing, as John of the Cross explained it, and I would have never been able to have believed that or known it if it weren't for him, and if it weren't for coming from the mouth of a saint, and such a spiritual master as he is and was. So I invite you to take a look at The Dark Night of the Soul, the PDF file down below, or the link online. It's free through your computer and the internet. Just to read 14 pages from that book. Don't go on. It's very extensive and lengthy and quite complicated. But the first 14 pages talks about how when we're first converted, we're focused on vices and the world, pride, greed, envy, sloth, gluttony, etc. But that when we experience a conversion in the church, as I did for me in my confirmation at 13 years of age, God cuts down those trees producing fruit of overt sin, but the seed of those vices still remain. And they manifest themselves, for example, with pride, no longer thinking I'm smarter, richer, more handsome, more beautiful than you, but thinking I know the faith better than you. I can pray better than you. I know the catechism. I go to mass. There's still a pride, but it manifests itself as this very religious, overtly pious thing, when in reality the root of these manifestations of piety and religiosity are still pride. Eventually, when we experience the dark night of the senses, God removes that vice of pride, for example, and replaces it with humility, so that we hide what God is doing in our hearts. We don't allow others to see it. We seem insignificant and unnoticeable to those around us, while we may be experiencing profound spiritual realities in our life of prayer. We celebrate and rejoice in the holiness of others and in their accomplishments and what God and how God manifests himself through their holiness, albeit maybe hidden as well. The conversion and the process of conversion is a challenging one, and it happens when God chooses. No matter how much our efforts or our desire, God can bring someone through the stages of conversion in a week or in 30 years. It's entirely up to him. It is only for you and I to remain faithful and persevere. In times like these, we need to focus on our own spiritual life and growth, and I think there's no greater person to accompany us on that journey and to shed light on what we're going through than St. John of the Cross. So enjoy the links below, my summary talk on the dark night of the senses and the conversion process from being a person in the world to conversion to Christ and being what John of the Cross calls in the English translation of his Spanish work, a proficient, to then experiencing the dark night of the senses. Ultimately, he leads us down to the dark night of the soul, but that's not for today. It's a rather complicated reality and one that I can't honestly relate to entirely, but it's something that Mother Teresa of Calcutta experienced for 50 years in her spiritual life. Be that as it may, the point is for John of the Cross, the closer we come to Christ, the darker things seem. Not because we're further from him, but because we're so close and his light is so great, we are incapable of taking it in. And so we must trust in faith that we are nearer to him than ever before by looking at our lives and confirming that we're keeping the commandments and living just as he did. In spite of the dryness, in spite of the darkness, we persevere. He holds our hand. He leads the way. If only we trust by keeping his commands. God bless you. Have a wonderful week. Take care.